Kristen Atchison here, and we are finishing up our conversation on social psychology, talking about social behavior. So remember, social psychology is a study about how people think about, influence, and relate to other people. So this is both, again, in real life settings and experimental settings. We've already talked about social cognition online. We're going to talk about social behavior today, both pro-social behavior and altruism and egoism, and also aggression. And then finally, we talked about social influence. Online, we talked about conformity and obedience. And then in class, we talked about group influence and prejudice. So social behavior, we can react in several different ways to the social groups around us, to the people around us. And we have two extremes in our social activity. So we have lots of kind of in the middle behaviors on this continuum, but our extremes of social activity are altruism on the positive side and aggression on the negative side. So altruism is an unselfish interest in helping someone else. So this is something that you're doing with no kind of repayment expected. So you don't expect to get anything. You don't expect to do anything, get anything back for this behavior. You're just doing it out of kind of the goodness of your heart. Where egoism is still pro-social behavior and is still a good thing. However, you're expecting some kind of reciprocity or some sort of personal enhancement. You're maybe doing it to look good, things like that. In either way, other people are better off, are pro-socially. Their behavior has helped this social network out. But there are differences in them. We're going to focus a little bit more on altruism, and the TED Talk that you're assigned to watch also focuses more on altruism as opposed to egoism. So explanations of altruism, we can have genetic factors that can play a role. Neurotransmitters are involved. We've got midbrain pain centers that are involved as well. The TED Talk also does a really good job of talking about some of these brain pieces that are really influencing our willingness to act altruistically. We also have psychological factors. So empathy is one of them, and empathy is different than sympathy, remember. Sympathy is kind of you feel bad for somebody when something happens to them. Empathy is when you kind of feel the exact same thing that they're feeling. So somebody is sad and you are sad with them. Somebody is happy and you are happy with them. It's kind of that ability to feel those exact same things as the other person is going through. And we can also have personality will affect this. How light, when we didn't talk about personality, but agreeableness is a personality trait. How agreeable you are, you're more agreeable you are, the more likely you are to engage in altruism. And the last thing is your mood. If you are in a good mood, you are more likely to act pro-socially than you are if not in a good mood. So if you're having a bad day, the last thing that you're thinking is like, oh, hey, I'm going to go help somebody out. That would actually improve your mood, we've seen. But we see that mood really affects whether we're likely to engage in those pro-social behaviors, if we're likely to engage in altruism. So again, pro-social behavior can be influenced by these dispositional characteristics such as personality and agreeableness. It can also be influenced by the characteristics of the victim. If we see the victim as similar to us in some way, we're more likely to help them out. So when we talked about social identity, people that we feel like have a match in our social identity, we're more likely to act pro-socially towards them than we are to somebody that might be different from us in some way across our social identities. Also the characteristics of the situation. We have to feel comfortable and safe enough to engage in these. So we'll see the situation will play a role. And like we talked about at the beginning of this chapter, the bystander effect plays a role too. So the more people that are around, the less likely we are to engage in these pro-social or altruistic behaviors, these helping behaviors. So when we have more people, we have this diffusion of responsibility and we're less likely to engage in them. So that's a really positive side of behavior, of social behavior, when humans are doing their best things. And again, that TED Talk is really, really great. And that's kind of why I'm just kind of overviewing these things. It's because the TED Talk really talks about these things in a lot more detail, and that's really beneficial. So the other end of that spectrum, the other extreme is aggression. First of all, you have to remember that humans are mammals, and mammals are primarily aggressive. So if you think about mountain lions, if you think about even deer, they fight. Like mammals are aggressive animals. And so we really have these genetic and neurobiological factors involved in our aggression. So we see that the limbic system's involved. Serotonin plays a big role. We see testosterone affects aggression. So we'll see, that's why we tend to see more aggression in males than in females, more physical aggression. Because testosterone is playing this role in it. So we have these pieces kind of in our evolutionary history that really make us behave this way. So we are aggressive beings, and 110%. But as humans, we also have the ability to kind of have psychological influences that affect our aggression too. So we're not just kind of just products of our biology. We also have other things at play too. So personality. So we saw agreeableness was related to prosocial behavior. Well, we see low agreeableness is related to antisocial or aggressive behavior. Low conscientiousness, high neuroticism. These are all personality traits that are related to higher levels of aggression. The adversive circumstances, if we're frustrated, if there's bad weather, if we're in pain, if there's crowding, these things make us more likely to act aggressively, even if it's something like yelling, right? So if we're frustrated and somebody says something to us, we're more likely to yell at them than we are to calmly tell them, answer their question, right? And that's again, these circumstances play a role in this as well. Environmental priming, so the weapons effect, if we've previously been primed, remember, think back to some of our cognitive and memory things. Priming, if we've seen weapons previously, we're more likely to behave in aggressive ways. That's kind of primed us for aggression. And it doesn't have to be like a gun. It can be any kind of thing that is primarily used as an aggressive tool. And observational learning. So think back to the Bobo doll, right? So the kids saw the experimenter behave aggressively with that doll, and then they behaved aggressively with that doll. So we see observational learning will play a role as well. And again, because we are humans, we also have these cultural variations as well. So culture of honor will play a role. Gender plays a huge role in the kind of aggressive we are. So overt aggression versus relational aggression. We tend to see more overt aggression in males, and we tend to see more relational aggression in girls. Boys and girls are just as aggressive. And some of the idea is that the reason we see this difference in the kinds of aggressive we are is because of our social rules. We allow boys to kind of act out, male children to kind of act out some of this physical overt aggression in play. Think about puppies, right? Puppies wrestle and they bite each other and they play. Human children are really not that much different in how they want to play. And so that rough and tumble play, we allow boys to engage in that more often than we allow girls to engage in that. And so girls, being just as human and just as aggressive, need that outlet as well. And so we see upticks in relational aggression. So I won't be your friend if you do this. Kind of shunning people, that kind of aggressive behavior that's related to a relationship is what that relational aggression is talking about. And so we see more relational aggression in girls and we see more overt aggression in boys. But again, this is probably an artifact of our culture and how we gender type behaviors of children, aggressive behaviors in children. Media violence. So we see video games, violence, frustration. Again, those things can play a role. Television. Again, your book does a really good job of talking about this. You have several things in your online participation that you already did last week that are related to this. So this should just kind of be a recap on how media can influence that. Okay. Thanks so much. This ends our conversation on aggression. Make sure you watch that TED Talk because that's going to go into a lot more detail on these topics as related to aggression and prosocial behavior, especially in terms of brain function. Thanks so much.